I'm John Ratzenberger. You know, Snow White is the foundation for so much that the Disney Company has done through the years. Let's dig into the nuts and bolts of what has made Disney tick throughout the decades. The story of the Walt Disney Company is connected to a classic fairy tale about an innocent girl and her 7 loyal friends. I'm speaking, of course, of Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. Some say that Walt Disney had the story of Snow White in mind even at the beginning of the Disney studio. In 1923, he partnered with his older brother Roy to produce the Alice comedies. The Alice comedies were about a young girl lost in a fairy tale landscape, facing danger and meeting strange and comical creatures. Sound familiar? They were a hit, and the studio continued to produce short cartoons. A big breakthrough for the art form of animation happened when Walt Disney gave the world the first cartoon with synchronized sound, starring a little fella named Mickey. It's hard to believe, but just a decade later, Walt Disney astounded the world with the first ever feature-length cartoon, Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. A story told so well that it's won the hearts of audiences decade after decade. Here's a trailer early audiences saw where Walt Disney himself personally introduces those lovable dwarfs.
The picture that every newspaper and magazine critic is raving about. Hear what the usually hard-boiled reviewer of Time magazine says. Snow White is as exciting as a Western, as funny as a haywire comedy. It combines the classic idiom of folklore drama with rollicking comic strip humor. It is an authentic masterpiece. More than 250,000 paintings like these were created by Walt Disney and his staff of artists to make the most daring adventure in the history of motion pictures, with new and amazing characters. Snow White, warm, human, the lovable 7 dwarfs. But let Walt Disney tell you about them himself.
Dwarfs' names fit their personalities. This pompous-looking individual is Doc, the self-appointed leader of the group. And this little fellow is Bashful. He's secretly in love with Snow White. And this funny face is Sneezy. He has hay fever. And old Droopy Eyes is called Sleepy. And Happy here with the beaming smile. And old Sourpuss here is Grumpy, the woman hater. And last but not least is Dopey. He's nice, but sort of silly.
The goal of this group has been to do an animated feature from the day I started.
This was the holy grail of computer graphics, to get to the point where you could do the feature film.
The biggest thing this film does to advance computer animation, I believe, is it tells a story.
You are a toy!
This film is driven by characters and story first. And even though it is the first ever computer animated film, the technique that we're using is secondary to the story that we want to tell.
I think if there had been another movie done in this technology, you'd still feel like you were seeing the first of this kind of film because of what John does with his characters. It's a very different thing.
I remember the moment when I first saw computer animation of any kind. I was working at Disney as an animator, and 2 very close friends of mine were working on Tron. And the moment I saw it, it was like, oh, this is it. This is the next step, the next plateau. This is the future. I knew that computer animation wasn't a whole new medium. It was just new tools within the medium of animation. So all the things that I learned as far as principles of animation and film grammar still apply. And so when we started working with it and making short films, the most important thing to every one of my films was story and the characters. That drove everything.
What we wanted to do was every year do another piece and keep advancing the state of our animation tools so that he could do better and better animation. And that's the way we all looked at it. He was part of the development team.
I had all these things that I wanted the system to be able to do. People were used to hand-drawn animation, and I knew that when our imagery was lit, textured, and rendered, no one had ever seen anything like this before. It had the feeling like you could reach up there and touch those toys. And that's what we wanted to show the Disney folks and others, what Toy Story was really going to look like. And once we showed it, all the doubts went away.
Hi, pal, what you doing?
I'm Tempest from Mars.
Yeah, what's his butt? Say, you weren't thinking of flying, were you?
Well,
You know Andy loves toys that can fly.
really? Well then, to infinity and beyond.
You know, Andy loves toys that he can find.
One of the great moments in Toy Story is the Green Army Man scene. Everybody knows these toys. There's a few, basic characteristics that we had to have. One, gun barrels always bent. Two, they have the mold flashing, the bits of extra plastic around their head. Three, their feet are attached to the base. So when we were putting Green Army Men in our film, we had to have those three things.
I got some old sneakers, I got a piece of plywood, and I nailed the shoes down to the board, and we tried walking in this thing and videotaped animators doing this. It was that experience and the analysis that allowed us to convincingly animate the Green Army Men.
It looks so great. We were like pioneers, and it was so exciting. Every day you would go to work, and there would be like something new on the monitor, on the screen, and you're like, wow, that's great! When we were starting Toy Story, we knew that we would probably be making the first computer animated feature film. When it got animated, it was even more exciting. But nothing prepared us for the step that it took after it got fully rendered. My jaw was on the floor. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And I mean, I directed the movie. I knew what was coming up, and I couldn't believe how amazing it looked.
Hey, Buzz! You're flying!
This isn't flying, this is falling with style.
Toy Story is just the very beginning of what can be done in this medium. And it's just the first inkling of what can achieve here.
It isn't often one can say, I had a lifelong dream and we fulfilled it. And now in fulfilling that, we can look and say, we've now started something extraordinarily new, and it's going to forever change the way that animated films are made.
Everybody's going to notice and talk about the fact this is the very first computer animated feature film. But the computers are just tools. They didn't create this picture. It's the people that created the picture. And we had such a fantastic group of people. And I had so much fun working with them. And that's what I'm going to remember for the rest of my life.